Okay, so my topic is called Dating Climate Change. And we just finished Climate Week, which was people talking about what we've done to the Earth's environment and what we can do to reverse it. And I want to talk to you today about what we've done to the environment and climate of dating. Now, you may think, well, I'm married or I'm really happily single. This doesn't affect me. But just like climate change, everything is connected. And what happens in one space can happen in other spaces, and we really have to be mindful of that. Okay, so I'm going to open by telling you a little bit about my heart timeline. So I think a lot of times people ask people about their relationship history. How long have you guys been together is usually the question, right? Because we like to think that length of time somehow makes a relationship valuable. And as you've heard from all the stories that Daniel procured over the past 2 days, we know that that is simply not true. So there was my heart, all the way on the left as a young child, bright, full, robust, ready, and then I had my first heartbreak when I was a teenager. And maybe like a lot of you, I remember lying down on the floor of my dorm room and looking up at the ceiling and just not being able to breathe and wondering, what is this feeling? And then I was like, oh my God, this is why they call it heartbreak. This is why, because my heart is actually breaking. And then that little confused face right there, that was the story I shared yesterday about the sudden breakup and the unexpectedness of that. And then my heart went along. And the one with the magnifying glass was the relationship that ended, and I have absolutely no idea why. And then I went on, and then, probably like a lot of people, I had a very bad interaction with someone I met on a dating app. And it just stopped me in my tracks for years. I never wanted to meet people after that, and I just shut down. And then something happened. I started to turn around, and I started to open my heart up again. And this is what my heart looks like now. It's been hurt. It's been battered. I've probably hurt people. It's probably what a lot of your hearts look like today. And this is the heart that I'm bringing into this room today. It's been through a lot, but it's probably more open than it's ever been before. So here is what I want you to walk away at the end of this talk. I want you to see the parallel between climate change and dating climate change. I want you to realize that everyone is impacted by dating culture, no matter your relationship status. I want you to have more understanding and care for the people who are out there dating today. And I want you to think more about the shape of your heart rather than your relationship status, something that you so bravely did yesterday. So here's how we're gonna get there. First, I'll tell you about the early signs when I saw maybe this might not be such a great idea, the dawn of the dating app, working inside the system, where dating meets work, and then my return to dating recently and what I'm working on today. So, in order for you to understand where I've been and where we're going, I need to introduce you to the most important key insights that have informed my work for 15 years. So, the first is I want you to completely redefine what you think dating even is. Dating is not just something that single people do. Dating is simply the skill and the art of getting to know other people. So when you meet someone new, whether that's a friend or a coworker or your barista, there's a little dance that happens, right? You're trying to figure out who this person is. Do you want them in your life? Is this someone that you want to get to know more? That's all that dating is. And we're all doing it all the time, no matter whether you've been married for 30 years or you're secretly swiping on Tinder right now. The other thing I want you to know is that there's a big difference between meeting and connecting. And this is really important. We use these words interchangeably, but they're very different and they have a big impact on how we move throughout the world. So meeting is often about those early interactions, introductions, names, job titles. And they're necessary, but they can often be draining and they can wear you out. Kind of like a networking event. You've got about 5 minutes in you and then you're like, okay, enough. Connecting, on the other hand, is often energizing. And it's when you just really get to know the person and you're just going that level deeper and it fills you with energy. And the reason why this is important is because we spend a lot of time, energy, and resources helping people meet and very little helping them connect. And the cheapest form of this distinction is the dating apps. Meeting is not difficult. They do that. They've gotten really good at helping people meet and have probably not done anything to actually help people connect. And this goes to the core insight. What has happened with technology, and especially with dating apps, is they're like fossil fuels. They've made it incredibly easy to meet and probably harder than ever to actually connect, to really get to know someone. But I have good news, and we're going to get there. So, in order for me to tell you this story of how I came to this idea of dating climate change, I have to go back to 2009. Now, I want you to think back. You probably had your first-ish smartphone. The internet was still a beautiful place. Twitter was mostly probably cat videos and cute jokes. It was kind of a magical time. And the way that I like to think about this period was we had phones, but our phones didn't quite have us yet. And during this time, online dating was getting more and more popular. We didn't have the apps yet, but you had to sit at a desktop and you had to pay. And I started noticing a big change in people. I was talking to people who were dating online, that's what it was called back then, and you could just see that people were changing. They were becoming less patient. They were starting to make lots of snap judgments. They were going on tons of dates in 1 week. And I noticed that it was just the entire culture of dating was slowly starting to unravel. So I interviewed a bunch of couples that met at work. And almost every couple told me that the person that they were with was not someone that they liked initially. And I think that's really interesting. And I'm sure you've heard of these stories. And then I would ask them, when did you know? When did you know that you liked this person? And it was so strangely specific. It was when someone helped me format an Excel spreadsheet, or someone made sure that everyone in the meeting was allowed to talk, when we opened a box together, when they slipped and fell, and I helped them get up, or my favorite, when the guy was in a rush at the copy machine and he still refilled the paper. But that tells you that we see each other in these tiny little moments, and those are the ones that open up our hearts. So a lot of people understand this idea of simmering, and that's what a lot of relationships used to do. There was time to simmer. But what was happening because of online dating and the speed of it all is that people no longer had the patience for the simmer. They wanted the fireworks. And everybody was going and looking for fireworks. And those moments I talked about, they were getting replaced with 3 things: drinks, dinner, coffee. Now, these aren't bad things. This is how a lot of people get to know each other. The problem was this was slowly becoming the only way that people were getting to know each other. And it was turning into a mini, court case. Am I going to hang out with this person again? And these are just not the best environments for getting to know people. So there was a big shift happening in the culture of dating. So this is how attraction often takes place, and you might be able to relate to this. You meet someone, you meet him again, you're like, hey, you're cool. And then your little heart flutters, right? And we've probably at some point all had this experience. But this was what was starting to happen in the culture of dating. Right? This is what was starting to happen. And I'm sure you've done this or you've seen someone do this. This is how things were starting to change. And if we did meet up with somebody, there was often a table between us. And we would meet someone, and then big life questions, and then everything that was interesting about you, the stuff that made you you, would just go away. And this is when I started to realize that how you meet is as important as who you meet. The scenario, the environment, the details, they all affect the version of the person that you're getting to know. And it's really, really critical. And the thing is, the industry of dating was being developed for how we shop and not how we connect. And the implication of that, and I'm sure a lot of you have had good experience on dating apps, so this isn't just a total takedown of the dating apps. But the problem with this is that it was turning everybody into a consumer, and people were being viewed as products. And attraction is often a realization. So I don't know if you guys know this movie. It's Clueless. It's one of the best movies of all time. But I was assured that there are plenty of Romanian movies where the main character realizes in the last 20 minutes that the person they ignored for the whole movie is the person they're actually in love with. And what's so important about this is the center of so many romantic movies for a reason. That the person you're not expecting might be someone that you're actually attracted to. And this was starting to get lost. So what I wanted to do is I saw these changes happening, and I wanted to try and offset dating climate change with event design. So I started studying everything that I could about the best way for people to meet. What were the best questions? What order should everything be in? How many people should be there? Where should we put the food? Who should we staff it with? And I started learning about the ideal environment for people to actually get to know each other. And what I was trying to do is I was trying to slow everything down, but also give people a really, really good experience where they got to know a lot of people. And so I had all of these different puzzle pieces. I was going to address all the modern dating obstacles. I was going to get beyond that boring profile that everybody has. My events were 4 to 6 hours because I learned that people needed time to actually let their guard down. I had one bartender at the events because I learned that when people stood in line, that was probably one of the most important places that they would meet people. And so people would be mad at me at first, and then when I explained what I was doing, they started to appreciate that there were inconveniences placed everywhere for a reason. And one of the most important creative decisions I made, which I got a lot of criticism for, there were no video cameras allowed. And this was a time when YouTube was really, really taking off. And I made the decision to never have any of the events video recorded because I did know that people do behave a little bit differently when they know that they're being watched. And I wanted to create the safest environment possible and the most fun environment possible so people could really get to know each other. So I started doing these slideshow events, and people would tell their stories, but the questions would be to get them beyond their profile. So I really wanted to get them to share stories, not answers. So for instance, a pretty common first date question, what do you do for fun? I get it, but kind of like what Daniel said, you're gonna hear about wine or hiking or something like that, right? It doesn't really tell you a lot. Here's the question we asked people. Share a screenshot of your credit card statement. Now, this was not about seeing how much money someone had. This is about seeing what they actually did. Because what you actually do is way more interesting than what you say you do. And if you meet that person, you're actually starting the conversation from a place of real authenticity. It's like, oh, what did you buy on Amazon? Why do you like Southwest Airlines so much? And so you're actually starting it from a very, very different place than what do you do for fun. Another one, what are your interests? Same thing, you're probably gonna hear hiking and wine. We said, show the browser history on your phone. And I'm sure some people had to delete theirs, okay? But what's great about this, again, it's who you really are. So this guy was a data analyst. And he could have said, hey, I'm a data analyst, or he could show you he's a data analyst. And you could see what he actually did with his phone. And this allowed for people to share so many different things about themselves. Like, just show us a picture from your phone that you think is funny. And it also opened the space for people to talk about things that maybe they don't necessarily talk about. So it was this beautiful mix between absolute boring shit and really, really deep, important stuff. One of the crowd favorites, show us the inside of your refrigerator. You get to see that up front. And then people sharing like real stories from their lives. This one was from a chemistry teacher. He said that he failed chemistry and that now he taught high school chemistry. Again, really, really important things that show you who someone is. So after I came up with I did all this work to figure out what was the perfect event, I started taking insights from the dating world and building an entire event around it. So, I'm from Chicago, and it's really cold in Chicago. And the other thing, this is probably common to a lot of cities, if you find out that someone doesn't live on your subway line, you may not want to date them. And so in Chicago, if someone lives on the blue line and you live on the red line, someone's gonna have to take a bus. And you ain't doing that for nobody on Tinder, I know that, okay? So what I did is I saw this, and I created an event called Red Line, Brown Line. These were the two subway lines that had the most transfer points in the subway system. And so in order to come to the event, you had to live on the red or the brown line. Now you could say, well, that's cute. But what you have done is you've completely changed the way people meet and how they greet each other. They were talking about their favorite coffee shops, about the potholes, about the tree that got cut down. And they knew if they liked somebody, it was not going to be too hard to get there. So these were all really, really important things. I started doing all kinds of different themes. So I started doing events for people that were recently divorced and over 40, people who were 25 and confused. It didn't matter. What I was doing is I wanted people to come to events for reasons other than I am single. Yes, you're single. But we can find another reason for you to all be together than the fact that you're looking for a relationship. And this just came with my deep respect for bringing people together that were looking for relationships and honoring that and not making it just, beer and a bar. So I said I didn't take any video, but I did allow a few pictures over the years because I wanted to remember what had been built at this period of time. And back in the day, we even did this. We would take people's phones, and we would try and get people to just connect in different ways. And you can see that there was a lot of care and attention put towards it. So the last event that I did, before I close this up, is I took this insight. We toast people at weddings and funerals, the moments they're not on the market. You ever been to a wedding and someone's like, man, Bob is so great. He taught me how to format Excel spreadsheets. He helped me move. He knows how to cook. And you're like, why are you telling me this now about Bob? He just got married. We don't often celebrate people in the moments when it would actually be useful for people to know why they're so fucking great. So I did an event called Meet My Amazing Friend Night. And it was the biggest event that I did before I left, with almost 200 people. And what it was couples and friends got together and they did a slideshow presentation about why their friend was so great and the things that you wouldn't know about them unless someone else told you. Because think about it, when you're on a date, you can't really tell people that you're a great gift giver, or that you would help them move, or that you help them with their homework. Those are things that only your friends can say, and that's what this event allowed people to do. So I'm doing this. It's April 2012. Finally, the big moment of my little life in Chicago, the New York Times calls. What are you doing in Chicago with these events? So I tell them, and my favorite part of this moment is that, that it was just like a big moment. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna take on the dating industry, but I've got this little thing going on, this little thing. It's like I felt like I was in a garbage pit and I was like the one person composting. Like all this trash is around me, but I'm trying to just like keep one part together. And that's what I felt like I was doing. I was really helping to fix this one hole in the dating ozone layer. And this was April of 2010. So I'm feeling good. Dating is not fixed, but we've got some great shit going on. And then something happened later on in 2012. So typically at this point, between sort of like 1995 to 2012, dating was a pretty open ocean. There were people dating, and then there was Match.com and Plenty of Fish, a little bit of OkCupid, but there weren't a ton of people in the dating pool. It was starting to, take some traction. And then 2012 came along. And Tinder showed up. And it dumped all of these people into the dating pool. And I know we just sort of talk about like, oh, it's been 10 years since Tinder, and sometimes Tinder's good and sometimes Tinder's bad. But I don't think we really talk about the impact that Tinder had on the ocean and the pool of dating. Dating went from something that you sat at your computer and you paid for to something that was free and in your pocket. And it cannot be understated how profound this change was. So yeah, of course there were good things. There were people meeting people, but there was a lot of stuff that people didn't want to look at. Just like our planet environment. There's always good things happening when you make a big change, but you have to look at what's happened to the ecosystem. The volume, people getting catfished, people literally being caught in nets of people. And yes, there are some good things, but what I just want you to understand and appreciate is just how big things changed almost overnight. So, I was kind of like a hippie that decided to go work at BP. I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go work in the system. So in 2014, I quit my job, I quit my events, and I went to go work at Match.com, the big oil tanker. And I got there, and I was so excited. I felt like I was, from the field, and I couldn't wait to tell them everything that I had learned and how I could make dating better. And they were not interested in what I had to say. And to be fair, they're a business. Their job is to make money. Their job is not to think about dating culture. But one thing that did happen there that I took with me is that I got to work on their 50-plus dating brand. And I got to spend a lot of time with people that were dating in this different season of life. And I just had a lot of affection and care for this group. So Match wasn't interested in what I was doing, but there was someone else who was interested in what I was doing. And so this is a very interesting thing to think about. So if you think about how our personalities have become splintered, dating apps were one of the first places where that happened. There was who somebody was online, and then there was who somebody was offline. And you had to bridge that chasm. And that was mostly just in dating. But now it was starting to happen at work. There was who you were in person, there's who you were on Slack, there's who you were on email, there's who you were on Zoom. And people were struggling with relationships at work. So I went to WeWork. They hired me to be their director of workplace connection. So I got to spend all of my days thinking about and helping people develop relationships at work. What was the best way to design a team outing? What was the best way to introduce someone who's new on your team? And say what you will about WeWork, it was the best job of my entire life. It was so fulfilling to take what I had learned in dating and to bring it to real-world application and help people have great relationships at work. So I know there's like a lot of like bad stories around WeWork and a lot of drama, and all of it's true. But this was one really, really beautiful thing that they did, was to make it possible for people to really, really connect at work. So in 2019, WeWork crashed, and something else crashed. This was the year that dating apps overtook every other way that people were meeting romantic partners. And so this is really important, again, in terms of the speed of this. And so you've probably seen this chart. It's been making the rounds for a couple of years, but it's a study out of Stanford. And it just shows you kind of how quickly overnight we used to meet through friends and community organizations and school in shared settings, in shared environments, in moments. And then that quickly, it was all gone. And again, I'm not saying dating apps are bad. I just want you to notice and appreciate how quickly things changed. So, it's 2020 and the pandemic hits, but I'm no longer involved in dating. I left that shit. I was like, no, that's enough. But then, during the pandemic, the apps became the only way that people could meet. And so again, I wanted to do what I always did. Can I just do a little patch in the ozone layer? Can I just do a little composting over here? Can I help in some small way? So I started a podcast called Paired by the People, which looked at the art of the setup. People who set people up. It's actually an ancient art, and a lot of different cultures do it. And it's not matchmaking, it's setting people up. And so I studied it, and I really unpacked, what did people do? What did people say? What was the perfect way to introduce somebody? And then I also did actual setups. I had strangers decide who would they put with somebody else based on some information. But the most important thing here is I just wanted to remind people that they didn't have to give their heart strictly over to their phone, that there were other ways. And that's all I wanted to do. And Vanity Fair called it the pandemic's most wholesome new podcast. So if nothing else works out, like, that happened. Then earlier this year, I stopped Paired by the People. Oh, sorry, quick story. So as I wrapped Paired by the People, one of the last stories I did was the story of Scarlett and Martin. And it's one of the most beautiful setup stories I've ever heard. And actually, Daniel, it's very akin to the Amy Krauss Rosenthal story. It's someone who is set up by their spouse who is passing. But the point and the reason why this was so important, it was such a reminder to me of how long the heart's timeline is. I don't think either one of them expected to be single in their 80s. And I don't think they expected to be reunited and to fall in love after 35 years of seeing each other. So this just, again, reminded me of the heart's timeline. Then I went on and I co-hosted the 6-part series, Land of the Giants, on Vox Media. This was about the past, present, and future of dating. And so this was this year, so I got to spend a lot of time talking to single people dating of all ages and of all orientations. And I really got to hear just how much things have changed and what's going on. And one of the things that this reminded me of is how few people understand that dating is a business and it is an industry. And there are very few players that actually control what happens to your romantic heart. That is not to depress you. That is to make you aware so that you can make great decisions for yourself. And one of the things that I noticed during this time, and how this relates to dating climate change is what I'm calling the death of the crush. So Daniel yesterday walked us through that exercise where he asked us to think about longing, which is such a beautiful emotion and a beautiful thing to try and tap into. This is sort of a cousin of that. So one thing that I was noticing was that people didn't really have crushes anymore. They couldn't recall those early crushes. And a crush is a very, very particular kind of attraction, and one that I think is really beautiful. The beautiful thing about a crush is you usually develop a crush on someone you're not expecting to be attracted to, because you get to know them slowly over time, and you start to see their mannerisms. And it sort of spoke to how dating culture was changing. Crushes tend to happen in very contained environments where you spend more time with someone. They kind of sneak up on you. But crushes and having crushes is really important, and we weren't seeing them as much. And so I wanted to know, did other cultures have a crush, the idea of a crush? And it turns out pretty much every culture has a word for this. And of course, I had to get the one in Romanian. And when Capucine sent this to me, and you guys double-checked. Someone I met double-checked and said, I think it was Vlad. Vlad, where are you? Yes, you said this is correct, right? Yes, he confirmed that this is correct. And I believe the direct translation is, I have a stain on you, which I love. And my mother told me that in our native language, the word for crush means I'm tangled in you. And so it's just amazing that every culture has this. And if you think about it, we're kind of losing that. Crushes are like the monarch butterfly. So if you don't know what the monarch butterfly is, it's beautiful. And it's incredibly important to our ecosystem because it pollinates. And one of the things that environmentalists are concerned about is the decline of the monarch butterfly, because it's so important to our ecosystem and our food supply and the delicate balance of the environment. And so I think of crushes like the monarch butterfly. They're sort of special, they're easy to overlook, but they're really, really important to the ecosystem of our hearts and the ecosystem of how we meet and connect with people. So you might be thinking, well, I'm not going to be affected. I'm married. Or I'm single and I love it. Or I'm in a long-term relationship and they're going nowhere. And you might be true. That might be true. But here's what I want you to think about. Just like the climate and the environment, what happens somewhere happens somewhere else. All of these wind patterns and all of these currents affect each other. So what is happening in dating affects everybody else. And I have a crude illustration of that. So you might think you're up on the iceberg and you're safe, you're up there. But I will tell you, even if you are not impacted by dating climate change, it could be your sibling or a parent or just someone you care about. Or, and this is the thing I hear a lot, your children, your descendants, people who come after you will have to deal with the legacy of the dating climate that we have built, that we have largely ignored and accepted as just the way things are. And I challenge you and I ask you to rethink this. So, who is going to lead us out of dating climate change? I've thought about this a lot, and I have two answers. And they're both probably not going to sound obvious. The first is Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift will save us. I'm actually not kidding. I really do think she could fix just about anything. But here's the thing about Taylor Swift and why I think she's so important and why I admire her. So a lot of people talk about Taylor Swift. She's an incredible lyricist and a songwriter and an incredible marketer. Here's how I look at Taylor Swift. I see Taylor Swift as someone that is completely willing to travel to every part of her heart and to tell about it. And to me, she's actually like a love leader. When I think about the people who are leading the tech and leading our dating industry, they're not doing what she's doing. They mostly have backgrounds in game design. But here's someone who's living with her whole heart. And that's what I imagine Taylor Swift's heart to look like. It's been roughed up, it's been beaten, but it's also strong because of friendships, because of her family, because of all the people that she cares about and looks out for. And so I actually think she has one of the biggest hearts around, and I think we should look up to her in some ways for how she has chosen to let the shape of her heart guide her, and not whether or not she has a boyfriend. The last people that I think are actually going to affect and improve dating climate change, again, may not be the people that you think of. So when you think about the timeline of life, we have this window, and I call it the should window. This is the window when things should happen, when you should find your romantic partner. And I think it puts I understand why it's there, but what I started becoming more interested in what I called the what could be curve. The people who were exploring what could be at this point in their life. I found them incredibly inspiring, incredibly willing to take risks, incredibly willing to sit through uncomfortable discussions, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to have beautiful conversations, to open up their hearts. And so I've decided that this is where I'm going to spend the next chapter of my attempt to fix dating climate change. And so earlier this summer, I launched the Later Dater Today. And it's all about dating later in life, whatever that means to you, but typically people over the age of 45. And so I have a podcast, because that's what I do. But on the podcast, I walk through all of the reasons and all of the benefits for dating later in life. And you don't have to be a later dater, but I go through all the concepts that I've developed over my career. And Daniel, you'll be happy to know I do not give advice. I just give people things to think about, because I'm with you. I hate dating advice. So I just want to give people things to think about as they date later on in life. So I'm going to read you the manifesto for the Later Dater Today, and then I have one closing wrap-up thought for you, that is for you. And then if there's time, we'll take some questions. Okay. The difference an R can make. Shit versus shirt. Fiend versus friend. One letter can change a word. But sometimes a single letter can impact so much more. Take the difference between late and later. One suggests when something should or must happen. The other points to what's next, perhaps upcoming. What would it mean to linger in the idea of later instead of late? Because there is no one timeline for when things could, should, or might happen. This belief is at the core of the Later Dater Today. We all have so many later daters ahead of us. The Later Dater Today is rethinking and updating what it means to date later in life. Welcome. You're not late, you're right on time. So that is all about the Later Dater Today. And I'm going to wrap up with just some final unfinished thoughts about I hope what you've gotten from this is just like a better understanding of how much dating culture has changed and what you can do. So, this is for you. I don't even know if you date on the apps, but just based on what you said yesterday, I felt like this was what I wanted to leave you with. Addressing dating climate change isn't about deleting the apps. It's about deleting the idea that being in romantic love means you are loved. This is simply not true. This is the one thing I am certain of. We must celebrate where someone's heart has traveled, rather than their relationship status. We must celebrate their heart's journey, no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi. Thank you for killing the should. And we are not late. We're just a bit later. So
love
we
that.
can take at least
And she's
a few
clever.
questions.
She's nice and clever. Oh, my God.
So, yeah, at least 1 or 2 questions, depending on how fast they are.
Thank you. Thank you, Lakshmi, for the wonderful... I'm over to your left. Yes,
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for the talk. Thank you for reminding us what the Queen, Taylor Swift, is. I think that's always a timely reminder. I'm still trying to articulate the question in my head. I'm very curious about the wider landscape of relationship climate change. And you touched upon this a couple of times, but I'm curious why you think about the centrality of romantic love in our culture.
What do we think about what?
The centrality of romantic
love? The sensuality,
And I'm
okay.
thinking, I don't know, like Bell Hooks' work and her thought about how maybe we shouldn't reserve all of our love to a romantic partner, the importance of friends, family, community. We all have stories maybe of friends who start dating and then they disappear from our lives.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts about it. Maybe Daniel as well. Later on, I'll catch him. I'm also curious what he thinks about that.
Sure. And I think that's what I was trying to say at the beginning, and maybe I wasn't as clear as I could have been. That heart that I put in front of you, it's not just the result of romantic relationships. It's, honestly, I think I've learned more about love from my best friend, who I have no romantic connection with. I've learned more about love and loyalty and being there for someone no matter what than I've learned from quite frankly, any man in my life, So I think that is what I'm saying, and that's actually what I was kind of saying about Taylor Swift. I think her heart is actually the composition of all the loves in her life, but I think we think she's only talking about romantic love, but I think she's talking about all the different loves, and that's what and I think that's what was so beautiful about her piece, is she was talking about the self-love and how do we do that. And so yes, I believe that the shape of your heart is the thing that we should be paying attention to, not your relationship status. Thank you.
And now it's me.
Yes. Hi.
Thanks a lot. First thing first, I've been delighted by your speech. And I was thinking about what I've said yesterday, and an important mention about it is the fact that all this journey led me to the conclusion that, I'm living proof that someone can love me how I need to be loved, even if for the time being that someone is myself. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking that into the other relationships I have in my life, either romantic or not. And yeah, I know that it's possible. So I'm stepping into new relationships right now with this sense of possibility. But I'm kind of a sucker for practical steps as well. And I was wondering, what would you, if you would prepare a backpack for a toolkit for someone entering the dating life, what would you equip someone with? What would you add in that backpack?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question, but I am going to say this first because I'm very much in agreement with you. I really try not to give dating advice, and the reason is not because I don't want to be helpful, but because I feel like when we give people advice, we suggest there's a right way and a wrong way to do something. And then people go out into the world and are always like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? And I think that's part of what perpetuates like a bad dating culture, is everyone being like, but I'm doing all the right things. I read that in Cosmo and I did that and it didn't work, right? So I really want you to not think in terms of right or wrong. And I think tools is something, I have a lot of them, and a lot of them actually are on the podcast, so you can definitely listen to that. But one thing I would think about is really understanding in what environments does your personality and what kind of lights you up, where does that happen, okay? Because you might realize that you come alive in the hardware store, buying mulch, or I don't know what the Romanian word is, but that, just like something like that. Like you might have like places where you really come alive. And so I would really understand what those are and use those as places where you have like your dates instead of like the standard coffee or restaurant or walk or something like that. Really, really take stock of where you come alive. Okay, thank you. Yes.
So thank you for the talk. I am curious, when you were organizing the meeting events, how were you addressing the possibility of people feeling frustrated or sad that they didn't meet a match and the pressure that comes with meeting someone at an event?
Great question. So when you don't, oh, sorry, I need to go to my last slide. Okay. When you go to a singles event that has not been properly designed, that's what happens. So most singles events, that is the only point of being there, is to like find someone. So what I was doing is I was making the content and the programming so interesting that even if you didn't meet someone, it would have been worth your time. And so that was really important to me, that like that it wasn't whether you met someone, it was like, did you have fun? Did you hear stories? Did you learn about something? Did you become a better version of yourself? And that was the thing that I was most excited about, is that people were saying, I didn't meet someone here, but then I went on OkCupid the week after, and I met someone on OkCupid because I'm different now. I have had people used to say dating is a toxic pool, and you might be the pool cleaner, right? Because I think people were coming and they were having a different experience, and they were realizing, oh man, maybe I should have asked that, or maybe I should hold on a minute, or maybe it's not a big deal if the person arrives 5 minutes late. And so it changed their internal architecture of who they were when they went out on a date. So I will be honest with you, the 3.5 years that I did that, not a person never complained about that. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question.